Together, we work as one for better LGBTIQ lives. Outright.
I want to give a brief introduction to our amazing intersex panelists who are with us here today. First, we have Vida from GATE. Vida is an intersex transgender woman and an LGBTI rights advocate based in Brazil, currently working for GATE. But before joining GATE, Vida's professional background in human rights matters included experience working for the Brazilian Ministry of Justice's Amnesty Commission, the Department of Human Rights and Citizenship of the Brazilian Ministry of Foreign Affairs, and the Communications and Representation Team at UNODC in Brazil. She is also a former Outright or current Outright United Nations Fellow, and she holds a scholarship position as a master's student in political science at the University of Brazil, where she also finished her bachelor's degree in international relations. So thank you for joining us, Vida. We're looking forward to this conversation. Next, I'd like to introduce Prashant. Prashant is from India, is also on staff at Intersex Asia. He is a human rights lawyer and a researcher. He is currently a researcher and a UN advocacy officer at Intersex Asia. In this role, he leads the organization's research projects and supports member organizations engaging with UN mechanisms. He's currently based in London, pursuing graduate studies in human rights law. Welcome, Prashant. And I don't believe our third panelist is here quite yet. Dr. Dennis Wamala from Kenya is a commissioner on the Kenyan Human Rights Commission and also the first intersex person to be appointed as a commissioner in Africa. Hopefully he will be able to pop on. He's having some technical difficulties getting in. So why don't we just jump in and start with the two panelists we have here. I would love to just start off by asking each of you generally, what is the current political and cultural environment in your countries, your respective countries, regarding LGBTQI plus human rights generally, and then also specifically intersex and how that fits in? Why don't we start with you, Prashant?
Sure. Thank you, Kimberly. It's great to be here. Speaking of India and generally about the South Asian region, I would say it is a mixed bag in the sense that while there is like growing recognition of intersex rights, there is growing awareness. At the same time, there are many concerning developments also that are happening in the region. For instance, I'm sure like people would have heard about the recently proposed amendments in Pakistan regarding the Transgender Persons Act over there. One major trend which we have been noticing for the last few years when any law or policy reform has been discussed is the conflation between transgender rights and intersex rights, and generally the approach has been to create this overarching legal category in which all trans and intersex people are clubbed under it, and which actually ends up doing more harm than good. Because it sends a signal to the government, or the government gets an impression that we have done all that we had to do, and yeah, now no more needs to be done from our end. However, what it ends up doing is it puts all the major issues of the intersex community under the carpet. Similarly, another trend that we've noticed in the last few years is that unfortunately, the progress for the rights of one community is being done at the expense of the other community. So this is very much visible right now in Pakistan, where the progress for intersex rights is seen as a window of promoting some things which are problematic for the country. So that's why many lawmakers have proposed amendments to the current law, saying that it is like a window of promoting similar concerns which are being which we can see in all the anti-gender movements. Very similar concerns we can observe. So I would say it is a mixed bag. However, there are some positive elements as well which we can note, in the sense that there is a growing community of medical professionals also who are coming forward as allies, who are supporting the initiatives being undertaken by intersex activists and intersex led organizations. So that's like a welcoming development. And I mean, I don't want to generalize this for the entire region, because this is very specific to India. In particular, two instances come into mind: the case of state of Tamil Nadu, which actually passed a government order back in 2019, where there was a sizable group of medical professionals who were supporting, the demand of intersex activists. Similar occasion was when Delhi Commission for Protection of Child Rights, which is a statutory child rights body, it proposed to the Delhi government to come up with a ban on unnecessary medical interventions. And at that point also, the Delhi Medical Council, which is the professional association of doctors, even it made a submission in support of the ban. So these are two very welcoming developments. So in the sense that one can say that going forward, we can hope for better things to come. On the political front, the one thing is that it is still not being seen from a rights-based perspective, as while the disability right, when it comes to the disability rights movement, it is still seen in an empowering framework. However, the intersex rights movement is, wherever it has found supporters, who have kind of a charity model in their mindset, which is probably kind of the first steps towards going forward to a rights-based framework. But yeah, that's how things stand. In particularly India, we can hope that a lot of things are possible, but in the neighboring countries, when it comes to Pakistan and Bangladesh, things are in a difficult situation right now. Yeah, that's more or less the situation here.
Thank you so much for that. And just to follow up on that for a minute, when you're talking about supporters coming more from like a charity model, are you referring to like a disability rights angle? Are you a children's rights angle, a combination of both? Just curious.
It's kind of a both, because what has happened is that to have an independent platform for intersex right hasn't been very much possible in India, or in other parts of the region as well. So when you are trying to advocate for intersex rights on platforms which are actually led by disability rights activists or by women's rights activists, you end up and when you are able to even make people aware about intersex issues, the first impression that you get is that they are looking at intersex people from a charity based model. So it's probably because of the route that we are taking sometimes, because to get access to formal decision making spaces is not so easy for intersex organizations due to lack of resources and capacity. So when you are given those platforms, you probably that's what ends up happening. Yeah.
Thank you. So Vida, same question to you. And I'm curious, in Brazil and more broadly in the region, if you'd like to speak about that, are you seeing some of the same conflation between trans and intersex? And is that proving to be problematic, or is that something that you're not seeing, like Prashant is?
Hello, Kimberly. First of all, thank you so much for the invite, and hello, Passion. It's really nice to see you. Well, I do realize it's the conflation between sex and gender, Kimberly, but that's like a conceptual conflation, which makes us a target for anti-gender movements. But for sure, this is this is not such a priority for us here. I really do realize we have some bigger concerns in relation to the intersex fight, and especially in regard to anti-gender and anti-LGBTI movements here in Brazil. That there has been a closure of a lack of access to state institutions, state participatory organizations, which are of the utmost importance in Brazil since the federal constitution in '88, which established these spaces of participatory spaces, institutional participatory spaces, and then especially since Bolsonaro, but rigorously since the coup, which removed Dilma from the government, and then the murder of Marielle Franco, which was a lesbian parliamentarian, and then now with this lack of access to the government institutions and the increasing hostility towards LGBTI activists, especially intersex and trans activists, which has been targeted in both online and offline. We have the case of Carolina Yara, which is the first parliamentarian, intersex parliamentarian elected in South America. She's now elected again for a state like the São Paulo state parliament. So for example, she has been targeted by many actors. She suffered an attack offline. For example, many of the initiatives I am currently involved have also been targeted. So we are dealing with a very critical environment, and talking about background, this is a fight we lost in 1500 when the first white man came here. And then I keep imagining the ancestral travesty intersex looking from the Monte Pascoal and looking these crazy people bringing the dimorphic sex paradigm, and then this tracks back from much longer, so much time again. So this has been a fight. We are looking for the breaches, looking for the gaps we can improve, we can jazz, and create our repertoire of interaction with the state. And my research has helped me to understand better how the intersex movement in Brazil is conformed and how it has worked towards the promotion of intersex human rights.
Thank you so much for sharing that. I do appreciate the really difficult environment that you and your fellow activists are working in Brazil. And yes, I think one of the common themes in India as well is colonialism, and the fact that we have existed for thousands of years, and now we're being forced into these binary boxes, we as intersex persons. So I want to ask both of you, just to follow up on what you've both said, if we could highlight a little bit more. You've already talked about some of this, but a little bit more about some of the biggest challenges in each of your countries and regions. I mean, we're talking about, bumping up against colonialism. We're talking about conflation and with the trans movement, and how sometimes that overshadows and sweeps intersex issues, unique intersex issues, under the rug. I also know that there's this growing anti-LGBTI, LGBT, growing anti-gender movement that is global, unfortunately. Kind of what are some of the other, like, what are some of the other challenges you each are facing in your countries, in your regions, just to articulate kind of like what the top challenges are so we can start to think about solutions. Do you want to start maybe, Prashant?
Sure. Yeah, I mean, the first one is that across the region, there's hardly any country, or even, for the bigger countries, there are any specific state which has protection against medical interventions. There is like in Taiwan, there is a guideline which says that, medical intervention should be postponed until the age of 12. And then in India, there are two states which are, coming very close to creating a protection mechanism. But aside from that, this is a major issue. And why I say it's a major issue is that, there are examples of countries like Bangladesh where the most prominent hospital in Dhaka is coming up with a department for treatment of disorders of sex development. So, and it is being promoted prominently, and this is a very, very worrying trend. So definitely the protection against medical interventions is something which should be on the agenda, and unfortunately it is not. It is not on the radar of policymakers or people who can influence laws and policies relating to the subject. So that's definitely one. Another one is definitely relating to legal gender recognition in the region, because there are most countries in the region have very rigid procedures which require assigning gender markers right at birth within 1 or 2 weeks, and then to change them, um, you in most countries there are no mechanisms. Some places where there are mechanisms, these are judicial, which are very cumbersome, very expensive for people to go through. So this is something which intersex activists are fighting for in their respective countries in Asia. um, just to give you an example, in India, the Transgender Persons Act, which was passed in 2020, it created the process for changing your gender markers in the identity documents, but it is as complicated as it gets. And it is similar for trans and intersex people. So it's a very, very problematic system that has been created. So that's because this has implications for everything else that that follows, from getting access to health services to education or employment in public services, because in this region, public service people are very, very much prefer having employment in the public sector as well, no matter how scarce that is. So getting formal employment becomes a big challenge when there is any issue with your identity documents. So these are definitely big ones. And the third one which I would like to flag is regarding the exclusion from formal data collection processes. So recently, many Asian countries have undertaken their census processes. Bangladesh had one recently. Nepal also. India is going to have it in 2024. So in all the countries, when they came out with their census methodology, the manner in which they wish to count or undertake the data collection processes with respect to trans and intersex people is very, very problematic. It's very much similar to the approach that they take while making laws. Everyone is clubbed under the one singular term.
Right.
Some places it is third gender, some places the terminology is other, some places it's transgender. So this is the approach that the governments are taking when it comes to either data or when it comes to law or policy. And the implications are that when you see the allocation in the budgets that the government do, or the allocations that the governments do in their emergency relief mechanisms, because as Intersex Asia, at Intersex Asia we did a major study of the impact of COVID-19 in 9 Asian countries. And while it was very concerning, we were not shocked to find that there was not even one single government initiative specifically targeted at intersex people. Um, it is I mean, it is not even, on the minds of the policymakers. And why is it so? Because when intersex people don't figure in the official data, or they are not, in the minds of policymakers while budgeting for for different issues, maybe health, education, then of course there won't be any budget allocation. So this is a huge issue which really needs attention, and it's a very complicated subject as well, because some countries which have reformed their census collection processes, they also didn't have a very good outcome, like Australia, which actually did revise its census collection process, but there are some challenges on that front also. So that's another area. Lastly, I would like to elaborate on the point I mentioned about you know the vulnerability of the intersex community during emergency slash, like, pandemic situation. So pandemic was, of course, like one of the biggest you know uh, event in the last decade, but many Asian countries are prone to recurring natural disasters. And even in those situations, the response that the government comes up with, it does not include the concerns of the intersex community. And this is something which is not even being discussed. This was a major recommendation in the report of Intersex Asia, that intersex people really need to be included in the disaster response or emergency response mechanisms, because it is like, um, I mean, every in the disaster response mechanisms, usually the governments are they're obligated to first take into account the concerns of the vulnerable sections, women, children, elderly people, disabled people. But and at the same time, they should be concerned about the situation of the intersex community, which is one of the most marginalized ones. So these probably are the four broad challenges that I would highlight when it comes to the intersex community.
Thank you. Thank you, Prashant. That was really concise. Vida, how about in Brazil?
Well, I see this, I hear this question, and what comes to my mind is challenges are all we have.
Yeah.
But, well, social movements are all about it, right? Well, identifying a problem and then mobilizing politically, mobilizing around it. So intersex movement has challenged here in Brazil, challenged back this background. In Minas Gerais, the state I come from, well, we say we are just like the Brauna tree, because the Brauna tree is a very common tree from the Mata Atlântica biome, from the rainforest biome, and it's very, very resistant. You can drive a nail into it, but it's at risk of extinction, because since colonization, people have used it for many economical purposes. Well, and I do think, well, looking to my experience with GATE and looking to the work I have been doing in Brazil, we intersex people, especially from the global south, are just like the brown tree as well. We have been facing adversities and, well, strive towards being alive. This is our main challenge: being alive, instead of being that the chance to, well, to live in a world that has mutilated us, has traumatized us since birth, since we are born, since day one, day zero, day minus 40, because they suggest abortion procedures to intersex mothers of fetus that will become intersex newborns. Well, that has been occurring in Brazil main challenges I see for Brazil and for the region is that, well, we have far less access to regional and global advocacy entry points. We have, well, a overwhelming, just like as Prashant said, lack of resources. We receive much less money from international organizations. I will not even speak about the national funding resources because there are they do not exist, and especially in Brazil, I have seen a hegemonic framework of LGBT movements that do not include intersex movements oftenly. So we are not like part of this intersectional approach of LGBT and I movements. We are virtually not present in many senses. So I would say lack of resources is our biggest challenge, a very constrained environment, politically speaking about institutions, speaking about the legislative powers, speaking about religiously based actors which have been brought to the state with after Bolsonaro's election, and of course COVID-19, as Prashant said also. Well, we speaking with intersex people, they say there was already a crisis for intersex people before the COVID-19. We were already facing a crisis in the health system, and now we have I don't know how to say it in English, but we have overlapping crisis, right? For intersex people, and trans people in Brazil, for example, has 40 years less in the life expectancy in reference to the general population. And COVID-19 has decreased this life expectation, which is 35 years old for me, so I have 10 years left, for example. And then for COVID-19 has decreased in, trans life expectancy in 4 years more. So 31 years for trans white people, because, well, for Black trans people, these are, well, very worst. So I keep imagining that for that situation for intersex people, we do not have data. Well, that's another challenge. We need data collection, well, community-based data collection, but COVID-19 has represented a huge challenge for LGBTI people, and that's probably very true for intersex people. Well, probably even more disproportionate, or even worse for intersex people in Brazil, I think.
Thank you, Vida. Yes, so many challenges, and I'm hearing a lot of commonalities, even though you're from very different regions. I'm also sensing that there's a lot of urgency in Latin America, and particularly
Global South similarities.
Global South,
right?
yes. Yes. I wish we had, there's so much to dive into here, and this is such a short period of time, but we're going to do our best. So when we talk about, not to gloss over the challenges because they are huge, but can we talk about some of any forward momentum that you're seeing in your region or in your countries, as you know, grand or as small as it may be, like community connecting, which is always a start, just to get a sense of where things are at. Maybe Vida, we could just go to you on that and talk about, you know, what are you seeing that is positive forward momentum, where you're able to actually see some hope, either in Brazil or in the region around the intersex movement?
That's a interesting question, Kimberly, because in my research, in my master's degree research, I interviewed approximately 20 intersex activists. Well, not all of them weren't really intersex. They are well, officers of the United Nations, well, very diverse actors, but all of them working in the intersex network of activists. And one of the question is, one of the question I asked them is, what are the successes and the and the bad parts of intersex, the failures of intersex movement in Brazil? And they all have been struggled with the question. Is somehow difficult to answer the question, but looking to all their answers, I would say the main thing, the main topic that appears about success is that the appearance, the public appearance of the intersex movement, the consolidation, the institutionalization of the intersex movement in Brazil. This story of the intersex activism in Brazil tracks back from 2010s when the OII Brazil or OII Portuguese was launched by Val Torres. But now we have another wave of intersex movement since 2014, especially articulated by a group of intersex adults who discovered their past of mutilation in internet forums, internet groups. And now, after the emergence of ABRAE, which is the Brazilian Intersex Association, the intersex movement gained another form of appeal, especially within LGBTI spaces, because we had a struggle to enter these spaces, these hegemonic LGBT spaces in Brazil. So after the organization, we are now part. We are that it's easier to enter these spaces, to dialogue with the organizations of the LGBTI field, and also to advocate in institutions, in the judiciary, especially because the judiciary is a partner of the intersex movement for a very long time. So I do believe the public appearance of the intersex movement in Brazil has been our biggest success, and I hope it flourish even more in the future.
Me too. Thank you. Prashant, what would you say? Some of the positive forward, you've alluded a little bit to some of it already in India and certain areas, some of the positive momentum that you're seeing, and maybe possibly where you see future momentum coming from.
I mean, there's not so much, in terms of the positive developments, but from the conversation that I've been having in the last few months with intersex activists from the region, there's a lot to look forward to in Nepal and Bangladesh, because both these countries are contemplating major law reform, and again our worry was that the whole agenda of those discussions is going to be centered around transgender rights. And while they want to work on both and create a laws for both communities, but intersex issues will not be covered in the detail that they need to be. But this is something which we are quite hopeful for, and we are watching it very closely. The discussions that are taking place. So that's definitely one. Other is that in the last 2-3 years, we've been getting a lot of support from regional level ally organizations, in the sense that if there has been any opportunity to do advocacy on regional or international front, uh, they have been very supportive, in the sense that giving the space to intersex organizations, involving them in any kind of advocacy or campaign initiative that they are undertaking. So that has been very helpful. For instance, very recently in Philippines, for UPR advocacy, the voice of intersex led organizations can, it's a double-edged sword. So basically, sometimes if intersex led organizations want to shape the narrative themselves, then because of the lack of capacity, their voice may not get heard. But if they are part of a larger coalition, and if they get good if they get the space in that coalition, then it is very helpful for the intersex cause as well. So, and this is something which we saw in Philippines, that being part of the larger coalition of LGBT organizations, it really helped the intersex Philippines to raise intersex issues. That's something which is very positive. Aside from that, I feel that in countries where the judicial branch is strong, there is a lot of scope over there. And here, the case of India is an example. um, if not all, most of what progress we have seen when it comes to LGBTI rights in general, it has happened because it was led by the judiciary, and then only the legislative branch tried to keep up. So this is what I hope for, because for instance, in Delhi, where the Delhi High Court, which is a constitutional court, it is following up on it has given specific directions to the Delhi government to come up with a ban within a specified timeline. And since that timeline is already elapsed, we'll be going back to the court to check on this, on their direction. So yeah, I feel like the judicial route is something which we really need to use more often, because engaging with the legislative machinery requires a lot more resources and capacity. Yeah.
Fingers are crossed for that to happen in Delhi. So interesting. What I'm hearing is, although there's been in the region, in Asia, there's been some problematic conflation between trans and intersex, and not pulling out the unique intersex issues. Generally speaking, I'm hearing being a part of the broader LGBT plus advocacy network and framework has had mostly a positive effect for the movement, like what you pointed out in the Philippines. Getting a seat at the table, raising voices. And that's not necessarily true everywhere. And on that note, I want to turn to Dennis, who from Kenya, Commissioner Wamala, who is here, I believe. Dennis, thank you so much. I know I apologize for the technical difficulties you had getting on, but I'm so glad to see you here. Can you say a quick hello to let us know that you're live?
Oh, thank you, Kimberly. I really appreciate, and greetings from Emeritus Commissioner Jadita to have organized this kind of a meeting. I'm sorry for the technical hitch, but glad I was supported. So I know we have a very few minutes to clear, but I just want to say that I'm the first intersex person in the country, in Kenya and in Africa, if I'm not wrong, according to my research, to have held this big office, having been appointed by the president of the former president, Uhuru Kenyatta, to hold this position because in Kenya, there's a promotion, protection of the rights of intersex children and adults, and especially, just trying to see how we can have mainstream them in all the countries kind of adventure. Of course, I just heard someone talking about LGBTQ. Yes, it's okay as a human rights organization. According to resolution 2075 of the African Commission, we recognize and protect all human beings at all costs, regardless of their sexual orientation. So we don't deny that. But constitutionally, as a country, of course, we're still struggling with so many other challenges. And it's something in the peak. It's not LGBTQ, for example, is not officially recognized in the constitution. But like I said, as a human rights organization, we really kind of protect every person's right, left, right, center. As an intersex person, I'm working with the LGBTQ group, of course, hoping that one day, one time, we shall get there. So I think part of the question, you're like, what has Kenya as a country done in terms of promoting intersex persons? One, for me, the best that we can say so far, what the country is writing on, is to have an intersex person be appointed by the president, by the parliament, through all the means, of course, with all the qualifications. I'm a doctor of philosophy in such a kind of an office. Then last year, during this year, August, general election, we had an intersex person who, vied for MCA. He was number 2. And we hope that next time it shall be okay. The progress we've made as a country is that we've had an inclusion of the I sex marker. People confuse, Kimberly, and you can help me, come up with this. People confuse third gender with that sex marker. In Kenya, during the 2019 National Bureau of Statistics, we had 1,524 intersex persons, which, according to me, is a lesser number because globally, we know that between 0.05 to 0.07 of the entire population are intersex persons. And in Kenya, we have 40,000, million, meaning we are between 300 and 700,000 intersex persons. And when I worked in this office, I've had the statistics. We have people, who've been there, and we didn't need to have them. Then there has been the utilization of, intersex persons in monitoring of the last general elections. I was able to mobilize about 28 intersex persons. That means people who've gone to school, people who have the credentials to monitor. That is inclusion. And then, so the last question would have been, where are we heading to? There's public participation of intersex persons in the country we're mobilizing. There's continued mobilization of resources from the government of Kenya and development partners, and you are our serious partner to make sure that we have intersex persons issues kind of adhere to. Capacity building for professionals in terms of medics, because most people do not understand the intersex, even the medical world, messing up intersex children, because your mother will say, because you have boys, and in Africa, they really look up to boys. Even when a child is supposed to have been a girl, they say, I want a boy, or I want a girl. Then in teenagehood, like I told you last time, during our last, by the way, Kimberly, 2 weeks ago, I just had a 39th serious surgical operation that did not even work.
Mm,
2 weeks ago. You
wow.
remember that's why I never respond to your email because I was in the hospital. So
sorry.
then we want psychosocial support for intersex children, persons, parents, and caregivers, because you know what it means. It's not easy. Public awareness, yes. And then finally, because I know we're out of time, I engaged Rotarian presidents across the whole world, and they're willing to give us a cytogenic machine for, you remember Kien, Peter's boy, child, who through your networks were engaging the doctor from Boston. And even myself, I'm thinking probably I should need to have a 40th opinion, because I've had 39th opinion from out of the country just to sell that cafecitla. I've had a fever that's been very difficult to sell, and it keeps on giving me infections because it's open. You know, changing nature is not easy, and that even affects me in terms of relationships. Kimberly, you look at the background, I have a 3-bedroom house, but I'm alone. It's a very difficult situation. Anyway, so then,
Thank you.
finally, what do Kenya need? What do Africans need? Apart from cytogenic machine, because we take samples in South Africa, in India, which is very costly, and most intersex parents do not even afford because of the stigma, because of marginalization. They keep the children behind the doors. What I want is to have at least medical budget in terms of assessment tests of the chromosomes, of the hormones, dignity medical intervention. I have an elderly person of about 40 who is in diapers. You know why? Because they messed her up. And right now, she cannot control her stool. She cannot control her urine, so she's in diapers. Mental health and psychosocial support for intersex persons and children and their families. We need counseling for intersex persons and caregivers. Health professionals need to be retrained. Health professional, in this case, I mean counselors, doctors, because they are not aware, they don't know so much about this. And then we want to empower the intersex persons in terms of life skills. At times, I have people who do not even know they're intersex. And so they're muddled up into LGBTQI, which, like I said, we respect everybody, but now we're saying intersex is a biological condition in terms of communication, in terms of money management, in terms of production, in terms of economy. Kimberly, education gives people empowerment. I'm lucky to have been born in a very supportive family. Where I come from, we have doctors of quite a number. I was supported. Most of these people are not.
Right.
In terms of technical skills, those who were not able to manage to go to high school, to go to university, whatever, in Kenya, we have something called TVET. TVET is a technical training, a vocational training center. If you can have a startup kit to empower, it will be very okay. And then finally, it's about documentation. We're lucky for the first time in Kenya, Ryan, your friend, you had invited, was able 2 months ago to change from Jane Weruri to Ryan Wambui in terms of documentation, because we want Kenya National Bureau of Statistics, Kenya National Registration Bureau, because when you're young, you're brought up as a girl, you grow up, teenage, you find, your man, I want to change the name, comes. we're engaging the government, Public Service Commission, to make sure that at least we fast track intersex persons to be part of the issue. I mean, part of people who are supporting. Then finally, advocacy. In terms of the laws, yes, we have now the Children's Bill that recognizes intersex persons. We are working towards finalizing the cases of Richard Mwasha, who was in court, was awarded because, it was either male or female, was put in a community prison. Community is the highest prison for death. He was molested because of the interest. So it was around 5,000 shillings, 500,000 shillings. We're now pushing that we have that. I'm sorry, I might continue talk, but I look forward to meeting you people personally and engaging further. Thank you, Kimberly and team.
Thank you, Dennis, so much for sharing that. And thank you for all the hard work you've done personally in Kenya on the commission and in collaboration with activists and attorneys on the ground. The recent changes to the Children's Act there have been huge milestones for the movement. And, as we were talking about the different approaches, it's been really interesting to watch different approaches in the global South develop, for example, in Kenya, working outside of an LGBTQ+ framework, but more around children's rights. And I think it just speaks to the need for us as a collaborative movement to be flexible, depending on where we are in the world and the issues that we're dealing with. But as you said, also respecting and uplifting the human rights of everyone within the queer umbrella community. So that's a tricky thing to do, and I really respect and am grateful for you and your colleagues and the work that you've done in Kenya to advance that in sort of a novel way. And I think others are looking towards Kenya and the region as well. I am really aware that we are up against time here. We have about 6 minutes, I think, left, and I want to be sure that attendees are able to ask questions of our three panelists. I think there's a Q&A chat here that people are able to, add your question if you'd like to the Q&A. There are a couple here already. I will just read the first one that popped in. Oh, it looks like I'm hearing our session is actually over. Is our session actually over at 12:20? I thought we had till 12:30. So it sounds like, unfortunately, we're going to have to wrap it up. Apologies, this just flew by. There are a couple questions in the Q&A, one for Vida and one directly for Prashant. Please feel free to type in your answers there, you two. That would be great. And again, thank you for everyone who participated on the panel. Thank you for everyone who attended. Apologies for some of the technical issues and for the late start, but I'm glad we were able to raise these important issues up during the summit, and hope to see you all in other sessions. Thank you.
So much.
Bye-bye.
Bye.
Thank
Goodbye.
you.